I'm curious, growing up, what did you want to be?
You know, I went through, like most young people, a lot of different phases. My parents, I think, acclimatized us to think of being a doctor when we grew up. My mom was a doctor. A lot of our family members, uncles and aunts were too. I think that came, though, from more of a place of financial security. My parents came to this country with not a lot of money, and part of that immigrant mentality is just a very defensive instinct, which is, how are you going to have, you know, a stable, secure life? So that's kind of the defensive environment in which we were raised. I you know, at points along the way, look at what other kids' parents are doing, thought maybe I would be a lawyer at times. That seemed like not a career that called me in terms of being in a service profession. I honestly kept an open mind when I went into college, but there wasn't something that I thought of that to say that this is definitely what I want to be. I had
Like, what about as a kid?
figures and mentors.
Like, you're like 5 years old.
Oh, that's a long
You didn't
time
want to
ago.
be an investment banker when you were
No,
five.
I think I wanted to play. I think I wanted to be a basketball player.
Really?
Basketball.
Yeah.
You're
I was-
taller than I expected you.
Oh, thank you. People do say that to me. Actually.
Yeah, I did
I don't
not-
know why
How tall are
everybody
you,
says
6
that.
feet tall?
I'm about 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
Short for the NBA though.
Fair enough.
Not NBA
Fair enough.
standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. In principle, you can achieve everything you ever want within the limitations of what God has given you as
So
your
when
talents.
did you
to make
realize
yourself.
that like basketball's not going to be a thing?
Probably
How old were
around
you?
probably around 4th grade. Yeah,
Fourth
this was
grade.
just realistically not going to be. I might have made the select team, but then there's the AAU league, which is you guys have no reason to know this, but that's
have no
kind of
clue.
where it gets really serious. And I was getting nowhere near that, and so I ended up switching sports to tennis, where I thought I had a better shot of actual success, and ended up doing well too. But that wasn't going to be in the cards to be a professional tennis player either. But a lot of the people that I played with did end up going to the pro tour, and it's a very different life.
How were you as a kid growing up?
It's hard to know.
Are you a good
Now that I'm a
student?
parent,
Yeah.
you kind of think about what you were like. I was somebody who probably enjoyed, I was pretty social, enjoyed meeting other kids. I was probably a kid who conversed with, when my parents would have their own adults or whatever over before my younger brother was, he's 4 years younger than me, but before he was of age, I was also able to probably be comfortable talking to people older than me or whatever. That was just the environment that my parents raised me in. I was always pretty curious, I think. I like to explore new things. I've always enjoyed almost debate and arguing and storytelling.
Where do you think you got that from? And that inquisitive mind?
It's a good question.
Were your parents like that?
Some
Did
people are
you-
just born like that.
I don't think I turned out the way that my parents intended to mold me. And I mean that in a good way. I think that they wanted a guy who put his head down, followed the rules, learned how to do something useful, built a successful and stable career and a family that had more security than they had or felt like they had when they were in this country. That was their, mindset for me. Like the kind of thing that you would hear in my household growing up would not be something like dream and be whatever you want to be when you grow up. No, it wasn't that. It was you need to focus and have stability and make sure that you have a clear path to a stable career. And that was instilled in us starting at a very young age. And so now that I'm talking through it with you guys, when you ask me where did that come from,
Yeah.
I guess there's something innate probably in many kids that make them react
But it
against
overpowered.
what their parents but there's a reactionary instinct. And so I haven't had a conversation like this in a while, but it makes me think about maybe it was a reactionary impulse that led me to actually pursue a career as an entrepreneur and live a career life that was completely unstructured at every step of the way.
It's interesting because you kind of fit the mold of what your parents wanted from you for a very long time. I mean,
Yeah.
especially with your job at Goldman Sachs. But then for some reason, it's like,
Actually, what's really just interesting is for me, when I went to Harvard and then had an open-ended career plan, that alone was quite a bit of a leap. And then when I decided to potentially explore career paths outside of traditional science or medicine, that itself, I know that the way I look at it now, or the way we would look at it now, is that's like a pretty cut and dry,
it's-
assembly line
Yes.
path. For my family's upbringing, that was a weird thing to do. That was already off the beaten path. They didn't know anything about what that world entailed. So yes, in some ways it was itself a much more, in retrospect, part of the assembly line path to go get an internship at Goldman Sachs. But if you ask my parents, that was like a foreign notion to them, which was interesting, actually.
But you still tried, or I guess had that like subconscious pushing on you that was like, okay, find like a high earning job that's stable where you work a lot, which was the Goldman Sachs thing. But it seems like you still had this like thing that you were born with that was like, okay, no, we got to do something more creative. We got to do something that is
it was
higher risk.
It was definitely beaten into my head. So there's, there's both parts of you, right? I mean, if we all look inside each of ourselves and ask ourselves, who are we? I mean, there's the part that's beaten into you. I mean, I guess in Freudian terms, you call that, I guess, the superego or whatever. And then there's the inner self, and the combination of those two things create a blend of who we are as people. So yes, there was the part of me also that grew up with some sense of stability and trying the tried and true path. That's half of me. And then half of me just wants to break that and rebel against it, and or just explore my own creative self about where my passions actually lead me. Now, I would say that in that summer internship, what I chose, it's probably one of the choices. If I was to go back again, I probably wouldn't have chose that particular summer internship. But I learned a lot from it in retrospect. And yet, even my senior year in college, that was part of what probably motivated me to start my first business, which I did in my senior year after that internship after my junior year, which is my first business that I founded. But I probably did it in some ways out of feeling constrained by that first summer internship.
So it seems like you very much want to have free will to go with what you want. Did you ever get in trouble with your parents growing up?
Yes, I mean, but like nothing extraordinary.
You were fairly obedient, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I wasn't like a kid who I was not the kid who ended up in detention.
But you were also highly opinionated.
Yeah,
like so back in the day when you were a
Yeah.
kid, did your opinions ever get you into trouble with your peers? Did you ever get into a fight, or did you ever like get bullied or something?
So I went to a public school from 1st through 8th grade. It wasn't a particularly great public school, but it was a public school that was the one we were districted in nonetheless. That was a place where actually being the straight-laced academic, put your head down, go to science class kind of kid wasn't actually particularly rewarded. And so there was probably one instance, this is what caused my parents to switch me out of that public school to go to a Jesuit high school. There was a flight of stairs. I was carrying my science books from class to class, got pushed down that flight of stairs, resulted in me probably, we think that was the cause, about a few months later having to get a hip surgery.
Who pushed you?
It was a random kid.
There's no
Did you
way
have
a
a
kid just
history with
walks
this kid?
No, it's actually really
random,
interesting. Yeah, it's really random. A lot of these kids grew up in difficult backgrounds.
Yeah.
So this is a school where a lot of kids in the classes, they weren't in my classrooms necessarily, but were like 1 or 2 years left behind. There was a wing of the school called the Success Wing, which is the wing that they would tell kids like me to stay away from, because these are kids who may be 14, 15 years old, but are still in 7th grade.
But they called it the Success Wing?
That's the wing that they called.
That sounds a
Do you
bit
want to pause
counterintuitive.
this
Well, yeah, it is
Jack?
counterintuitive. But the
wanna-
Success Wing was, I probably
Yeah.
went in there for one class ever, but the Success Wing was the wing that you stayed out of. But yeah, it's a place where, you got a nerdy kid with, glasses and carrying his science textbooks from class to class who's an academic guy. That's a target. But that was also a good experience for me because, you're an outsider in that setting. That's fine. But I went to a different school setting where I was an outsider, which was St. X High School in Cincinnati. So that was a Catholic high school.
Yeah.
I was a lone Hindu kid, and that was also an interesting learning experience too. And so I've probably always been in settings where I have been comfortable, grew to be comfortable, I would say,
Yeah.
in being in settings where I was, often the odd man out.
So,
And that's kind of was my big part of my upbringing.
What happened to the bully afterwards?
I don't
the guy
remember.
who pushed you.
Yeah, I don't think it was like, I didn't go running to a teacher. We didn't
Really?
it was, I think, probably nothing. I couldn't even remember who the kid was. It wasn't a kid who was in my classes or in, because we were, they had slightly advanced classes or slightly remedial classes. There were different classrooms, but in between classes, it's the same group of kids going together in one school. And, probably nothing happened.
And you actually like tumbled down a flight of stairs.
Yeah, we were pushed down a flight of stairs.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it happens. It's the kind of stuff that goes, growing up. It's probably the biggest instance of what I would call the closest thing to bullying that I experienced. But it was definitely something that, a teacher of mine then pulled my parents aside when they picked me up from school. They're like, you need to get this kid the heck out of here.
Being an adult has its high points. You can eat ice cream for dinner, you can play video games whenever you want, and you can even eat ice cream while playing video games. But sadly, it's not all fun. You have to do your taxes, figure out what's for dinner every night, and of course, make doctor's appointments. But for that one, there is our sponsor ZocDoc, the healthcare app that makes adulting that much easier.
For those unaware, ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the one that's the right fit for your needs, and then click to instantly book an appointment.
We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and so much more. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, who are located nearby, who are a great fit for any medical need you may have, and who are highly rated by verified patients. You can also see their actual appointment openings, choose a time that works for you, and click to instantly book a visit. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even score same-day appointments.
I'd highly recommend you check out ZocDoc because it really makes the entire process simple. And in the past, I'll admit sometimes I put off things like this because I just didn't want to go through the hassle. But ZocDoc really helps to streamline everything and just makes it easy. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/iced to find and instantly book a doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/iced, ZocDoc.com/iced with the link down below in the description. Thank you so much, ZocDoc, for sponsoring today's episode. And now let's get back to the podcast.